Hey, Stephanie, are you with us online?
I sure am.
All right, perfect. All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 10 o'clock, and it looks like we've got a few more folks wandering in, but out of respect for everybody's time, we want to go ahead and get started. I am Russ Harris. I am the Executive Director for the Southwestern Commission, or what's called the Council of Governments for the 7 western counties, the towns within those counties, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. And so we are partnering with NC Commerce this morning for this public input session around community development block grant, disaster recovery funds. So this is one of the bigger pots of money that we expect to get in North Carolina to address some of the storm damages. And so this is an important part of the process. Stephanie McGarrett is with us online. She got snowed into Raleigh, and so she's going to be explaining the plan over the phone, and we can look at the slides as we go. But the state is required to access these funds to do an action plan. So what we're talking about this morning is the draft of that action plan. And a really important part of that process is to hear from people in the public and key stakeholders as to what's important to you all. So before we get into going over the plan, just want to real quick kind of figure out who's in the room. So we're just going to go around real quick and do introductions. If you're a member of the public and you're just here out of interest, you can just say your name. If you're a stakeholder with an organization, please say who you're with. And Karina, I'm going to start up. Is that one working now, Drew? Yes. And Drew, do you want to introduce yourself maybe, and then you can be our...
So I'm Drew Christie. I'm the Associate Director of Governmental Relations for GROW NC, which is Governor Stein's recovery office. I'm based in Asheville, and I cover all the affected storm damaged areas. So I'm the boots on the ground, local point of contact for GROW NC.
Good morning, everybody. Karina Ruffier. I'm the Executive Director for the Haywood County Tourism and Development Authority.
Bryant Moorhead, County Manager.
Will Scarborough, Management Analyst at the county.
Don Ramsden with Haywood County.
Hannah White, Haywood County Community and Economic Development.
Patricia Cantrell, Finance Department, Haywood County.
Kristen Owen, Finance Director, Haywood County.
Lene Schuler, Southwestern Commission.
Zelda Briarwood with Quality Data Systems. I help maintain the ATMs all through Western North Carolina.
Steve and Celeste Messer.
Byron and Shirley Grimmett, just interested members of the public.
Daniel Mannering, Director of Tuckasegee Water and Sewer Authority over in Jackson County.
Jason Marino, Project Manager, Graham County.
Holly Jones, I'm the Director of the Governor's Western Office.
Good morning, Elizabeth Becker with Dogwood Health Trust, a private foundation covering the westernmost 18 counties.
I'm Cindy Sellers, Haywood County, concerned citizen, and I've been working with New Hope Samaritans since the hurricane.
I'm Maggie Leftwich. I'm the Affordable Housing Manager for Smoky Mountain Housing Partnership and the Affordable Homeownership Division of Mountain Projects.
Justin Illage with some ideas I want to present later to improve our lives here in Haywood County.
I'm Becca Scott. I'm with the Southwestern Commission.
Terry Clark, citizen.
Salisa Willett, United Way of Haywood County.
Denise Teague, Mills Ministry at Clyde Central.
Kevin Sandifer, local resident and small business owner.
Joy Garland, Town of Clyde.
Lisa Stannett, Town of Canton.
Chuck Dixon, Town of Waynesville.
Dale Glanch, Clyde Community.
David Pfister, I'm with Haywood Habitat for Humanity.
Jared Araji, I'm the construction manager for Haywood Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, Stephen Monica Ness.
Dylan Huffman, Haywood County Public Information Officer.
Zeb Smathers, Town of Canton.
Andrew Cutler with the U.S. Small Business Administration.
Hillary Sherman, Economic Development Administration.
William Height, Town of Waynesville Environmental Sustainability Board.
And we can't leave out the distinguished members from Haywood County.
Karen Bradish, Assistant County Manager for Recovery and Resiliency.
Tommy Long, Haywood County.
Sherry Rogers, Haywood County Register of Deeds.
And with that, Stephanie, we'd like to turn it over to you now to start the presentation and introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry to not be able to be there today. Our roads, I live in Pittsburgh and Chatham County, our roads are still pretty icy and had a lot of accidents here. Probably not a good idea to, to let people be on the roads down here in the triangle with snow. I just want to say a little bit about myself. I am a native of Western North Carolina. My dad and mom, Frank and Claudia Grice, live in Lake Junaluska and have for the past 20-ish years. My dad is a retired Methodist minister, so we have, I actually grew up in Lake Junaluska, but first, part of our tour of Western North Carolina churches took us to Burke County. So I was born in Morganton and lived in Drexel, and then moved to Spindale, and then was lucky enough to be in Lake Junaluska and go to Junaluska Elementary, Waynesville Junior High, and Tuscola, and then had to move my senior year in high school down to the Triad. And so we actually lived in Brevard for a short period, too. So I'm very familiar with Western North Carolina, Haywood County in particular, and have worked in government for quite some time, most recently leading the pandemic recovery efforts on behalf of the state. There were about $11 billion that came through our office, and we worked with the General Assembly and the governor and the state agencies and local governments to make sure that those monies were dispersed as directed by appropriation and that we managed them wisely. And so when Governor Stein took office, I switched over to the Helene Recovery in the Department of Commerce. We have a new division. It's called the Division of Community Revitalization, and we work together with Grow and See, which is the Governor's Recovery Office for Western North Carolina. Commerce's responsibility is to manage this community development block grant, disaster recovery funding, as well as any other funding we may get from either the state and or federal government around Helene recovery that's housing and economic development related. I will say there's like a 10-second delay, I think, between what you guys are saying in the room and what I see on the screen. So I think sound is in real time. The video is a little bit slower. So my apologies if we're off just a little bit. Our goal for today is to go through the action plan. And if you want to go ahead and advance the slide, we can talk a little bit about what we know so far about the damages in Western North Carolina. So I think we have to start and remember with anything that we lost 106 North Carolinians who lost their lives during the storm. This is, in addition to that, this is the most costly storm that we've seen in our state's history. Hurricane Florence was around $15 billion worth of damage. The Office of State Budget and Management has estimated that there was about $60 billion worth of damages as a result of Helene. These are just estimates, so we're trying to get to a more accurate number, but the initial estimates are that there are around 74,000 homes damaged, 5,000 miles of state-maintained roads, 7,000 to 8,000 private roads and bridges, and as we can all see and see on a regular basis, 50 million cubic yards of debris. Next slide, please. So HUD, the U.S. Office of Housing and Urban Development, does give money and runs a disaster recovery program called the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery. And this is a program many of you may be familiar with, the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is a regular and continuously run program. But disaster recovery is a special allotment that happens when Congress awards or appropriates money for communities that have been negatively impacted by disasters. And this happens across the country. But HUD wants to make clear that these are the funds of the last resort. So these funds are really geared towards long-term recovery. It's not a short-term response. And the rules that they have in place for the monies are more indicative of a long-term program. So the first thing that we have to do as a state is we have to develop an action plan, which lays out how we intend to use the funds. And then HUD provides for us what they call their most impacted and distressed areas, or mid areas, for grantees. So HUD defines these areas and then requires that at least 80% of our community development block grant disaster recovery funds are spent in these areas. North Carolina found out in mid-January that we were going to receive $1.4 billion total in community development block grant disaster recovery funds, $1.2 billion for unmet needs, and then $186 million for mitigation activities. Next slide, please. So there are some requirements, as I indicated earlier, from HUD, and one of these is that that they have to be used in 3 different areas within our action plan. So we need to address housing, we need to address infrastructure, and we need to address the economy. This is one of the few pots of money that we actually have as a state for housing. So we are proposing in this plan, which we will discuss in detail next, that we plan to spend the majority of the funding for housing and the rest to support community infrastructure and economic support. So one of the things that we need to get input from you, and this is the first of that kind of public comment session, is for you to tell us what you think about how we are proposing to spend the money. Next slide, please. So this slide shows where the most impacted and distressed areas are. Those are shown in the shaded or the crosshatch areas. There are 12 counties that HUD has designated as most impacted and distressed, along with 5 counties where HUD has identified a zip code that would fall in that mid area. That includes a portion of Madison County, a portion of Polk, a portion of Cleveland, a portion of Caldwell, and a portion of Mecklenburg County. HUD has a formula that they apply to figure out what these mid areas are. We've already kind of looked at this data, and it's raised some questions for us, particularly when you look at that western part of Madison County, for example, being excluded, when we know that Hot Springs is in that area, and we know that Hot Springs was hit particularly hard by the storm. And HUD uses FEMA data. They use data from the Small Business Administration. And so what we've learned from talking with disaster experts is that it's probably not the best use of our time right now to ask HUD to change the mid areas. It's probably a better use of our time to go ahead and put our plan together, knowing that we can choose where to spend another 20% of funds, because we have to spend 80 in the mid area defined by HUD rather, and then we can choose to spend 20% in an area of our definition. And so the state is proposing that we spend 20% in the dark blue counties. So those counties, as you can see from here, are those where people are eligible to apply for all categories of FEMA assistance. The light blue counties are just categories A and B. So while they may have had some damage in those counties, it wasn't quite as extensive as the damage that occurred in the darker blue counties. So this is the first thing you need to understand, is how the mid works and how we are given this definition by HUD. And I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. Drew's going to help moderate along with Russ since I couldn't be in the room with you today. So next slide, please. So of our $1.4 billion, we're proposing that we use $807 million for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of owner-occupied units. So these are single-family homes that were either damaged or destroyed as a result of Hurricane Helene. We are also proposing that we put $191 million into rental housing that was either damaged or destroyed by Helene. Some of that would be in small rental units, and some of that would be in larger multifamily units. And then another $53 million that we would set aside for workforce housing for ownership. This workforce housing for ownership part would be, it could be replacing units that were damaged or destroyed, but it could also be in creating new units. We know that across Western North Carolina, there's a lack of housing for people who are in the workforce in our communities. And so we want to try to use some of this funding to help address that problem in the Helene impacted areas. We're also proposing that we put $111 million into commercial district revitalization. So we've left that pretty broad, and we can talk about it a little more later, but really to address the areas where we had downtowns or places like in Waynesville, Frog Level would be an example of this, where we had significant flooding and damage to a part of the commercial district. And then we are proposing that we put $194 million into community infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then lastly, 5% in administration. We can spend up to 20% for administration and planning, and we're for the state, and we're proposing not to do that and take the smallest amount possible. I would also point out that if we don't need all of it for administration, so we're trying to be as lean as we can put that money towards other costs, program costs. So next slide, please. This gets into the 5 areas that we're proposing to fund. So again, that first, and where most of the money goes, would be towards rehabilitation or reconstruction of owner-occupied units seriously damaged or destroyed from Helene. HUD does require for us to spend 70% of our dollars helping those folks who make less than 80% or less of the area median income. That's how they define low and moderate income households. And so our focus would be on those that are lower income, who are elderly or have another physical limitation or handicap, or are those who may have small children and have other pressing needs to get into housing more quickly. I will point out and try to set the expectation that these funds, again, are meant for long-term recovery, and trying to take on this reconstruction will take a long time. It will not be a quick fix. HUD gives us 6 years to spend this money from the time that we get a grant agreement with them. And I want to point out that we do not have this money yet. The money is still in Washington, D.C. We have to go through a whole series of processes with HUD, including right now, which is the release of the action plan and a 30-day public comment period before we incorporate the comments into the plan and then turn it into HUD. HUD then has a set period of months in which they can take to approve our plan. And only after the approval of the plan do we have the chance to start drawing down funds. So this is really focused on long-term recovery, and I just want to make that as clear as I can. The second part of the housing, the workforce housing, that's what we're proposing that we would do a contracting or a grant process where we would have for-profits, not-for-profits, local governments that could apply to build these kinds of workforce housing, workforce solutions for housing, and it would be a rent-to-own units where they would be for purchase by low to moderate income housing. So again, those households that HUD wants us to focus the money on. The third program would be rental, again focused on small rental and multifamily construction, and focused on those units that were destroyed or damaged as a result of Helene. And this would be, again, a program where we would seek to award contracts to those nonprofits, for-profits, local governments, or others that are building or have small rental units or multifamily units. And again, the purpose is really to try and use this funding maybe to bridge the gap. Maybe they have other funds for a project that they're already working on, and so we want to stretch these dollars as far as we can. On the infrastructure side, we're proposing that local governments could apply for funds that would, again, help them complete infrastructure projects that are important to the community, that would help them become more resilient and more able to withstand any future natural hazards. FEMA public assistance does pay for a portion of public projects, but they don't cover all of the project, and they also don't allow they make communities rebuild back to what they have. They don't look at how you could change something going forward or how you could expand, say if it were a park or a wastewater system or things like that. So we're keeping this broad, but welcome your input, because we want to be able to be flexible and know that there may be infrastructure projects that are needed across the region that we're not going to be able to capture all of them. So we try to keep it broad so that we can consider and award a wide range of projects. The same would be true for the commercial district revitalization. We would propose that we provide grants to local governments or nonprofit organizations to carry out revitalization activities, and those would be the eligible applicants. And again, there would need to be a link to disaster recovery needs. I would say generally we are anticipating that we have tens of thousands of housing units and houses that have been destroyed, and we do not think that this money is going to cover all of them. So we do think there is going to be a gap, and we are seeking to get some additional federal or state money to help us close the gap. Right now, we don't have a clear sense of exactly how big that gap is, and we're working to try to understand that. Next slide, please. There are multiple ways in which you can give us input, and one of the ways is in this session. So we do want to ask you to answer these questions in terms of what you think will be most relevant for your communities. Are there any other things that we haven't thought about or captured that we need to consider as we continue to work on our action plan and incorporate comments and feedback? And then are there any things that we can do to make these programs as simple as possible for access? And before we get into this discussion part, I would like to go to the next slide just to make sure that you're aware of all the ways that people can give us their feedback. So it's not just today, although we definitely want to hear what you have to say today, but you also can go to the website. You can read the action plan in detail. It's 126 pages long, and it goes into even more detail on the programs we just talked about. There's a form that you can fill out, and you can put all of your comments there. You can also email us at helene.recovery@commerce.nc.gov. We're going to post an FAQ, or frequently asked questions document, on our website, so that as we get these questions, I think we're getting a lot of the same questions. We'll go ahead and post our answers. And then we're holding 6 public meetings. This is the second of 6. We may also add some additional meetings online and virtual sessions for those who couldn't make these. We also accept comments by mail, and that's the mailing address. And of course, if you would like to fax us, we have a fax machine as well. So that is the end of the formal presentation, but we are looking forward to your comments and answering what we can for the questions that you may have. Thank you.
And Drew, before you lead this conversation, let me get away from that microphone because it's speaking into my own ear. Just in terms of framing, there will be different elevations to this going forward. So there's, this is 30,000 feet, and we're kind of seeking input on the plan. The time to pitch specific projects will be later when the state receives this funding and opens up some of these grant processes. So just in terms of this conversation today, I just kind of want to frame it in that way, that we're we're kind of looking for input specifically on these general categories.
Thanks, Russ. So we're going to open up the floor for questions. Feel free to raise your hand or whatever, and we'll pass the microphone to you. But when you speak, please introduce yourself and your organization that you're representing, or if you're here as a constituent or resident of the area. Who wants to take the first step and be the guinea pig for the first question?
And we have to talk into the microphone so that Stephanie can hear us.
My name is Jack Caldwell. I'm a resident, live up on Allens Creek, and I wanted to find out, and this is at the high level also, is there any price gouging declaration or anything like that in place to help us? Because I'm here because I need to get a bridge replaced. I'm not talking about a culvert, I'm talking about a bridge. And I've gotten 2 out of 3 estimates. And Lord help, I'm not going to be able to in good conscience go to FEMA and give them the quotes that I've got. And I know people are, need to make a living and stuff like that. But here again, I'm getting 3 estimates and they're through the roof. So is there any kind of protection in place for us? Because here again, I don't want to waste federal funds and things like that. So is there anything like that, or is there a program, or how can we be sure that the prices that we're getting, the quotes that we're getting, are getting double checked? Thank you.
And Stephanie, I think I'll start off with that question there. I think, well, I know under Governor Cooper, I think Governor Stein may have continued the executive order for price gouging. Do you recall, Holly, if price gouging is still in effect under the executive orders? And so, sir, after this, you and I can talk, and I'll give you my information, and we'll discuss it, and I'll look into it for you. But for this meeting, if we can keep questions related to housing for the HUD plan here, we again, feel free to come up to me afterwards and discuss any questions you may have not related to this. But for this meeting, we're strictly speaking for the HUD action plan, because I think as Stephanie mentioned that public comments started this Tuesday, and we have 30 days for public comments before we have to turn our action plan over to the federal government for them to review. So this is part of that public comment section. But no, don't apologize. I'm just trying to clarify for everybody. If you have any future questions about stuff not related to this, come see me afterwards. I'll be happy to get your information. We can discuss.
Yeah, I will say thanks for that question as well. And I agree, Drew. I was going to suggest Drew help you get to the right person on your particular situation. But the broader question I think you raised is important about how we make sure that we're efficient with the money that we have been given by the federal government. And we are going to have a contracting process in place so that we can not be in a situation where we're being asked to pay for something that is what most people would consider to be price gouging. So Drew can help you again with your specific situation, but I think the overall point you raised is a good one, and thank you for that.
I just have a question. I mentioned the $53 million in, Terry Clark, citizen here in Haywood County. There's mentioned the $53 million in workforce housing. So is that just a fancy word for low quality housing, or how do you ensure standards for that $53 million is going to be spent?
That's a great question. No, it does not mean low quality housing. What it means is that we know that in several parts of the mountains, if you work in a job, in a tourism job, or even for wherever in an employer in the counties, you may not be able to afford to live in the community that you work in. And so we are trying to build more affordable housing so that people have a chance to own housing in the community that they live in. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, just back to quality. How do you ensure it's still quality even if it is more affordable?
So we have a series. First of all, we have a disaster recovery expert that's working with us. He has extensive experience. Puerto Rico, New York, South Carolina, Florida, other places that have had disasters, Mississippi, Louisiana, that had disasters like this. And, you know, we've learned a lot of lessons from how we've done this in the past. And so part of what we intend to do is to have contracts with various builders, and we will also have quality control checks where we go in and make sure that what builders are building are to the standard, which we will also have to meet the county standard, and they will also inspect the homes that are being built, and that we get those built to according to the codes and to the standards that we put in place. I guess the same way you or I would build a house, and making sure that it's to the standards that are in place by the county and the authorities, as well as to the quality standards that we put in place up front.
I don't know if this is the part where I can present information versus ask questions, so you tell me if you want me to wait. I'll be happy to wait. But this all addresses the infrastructure and the monies we spent. My name is Justin Elledge. You tell me if you want me to wait, and I'll hold off. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
Stephanie, I defer to you, but I think we may want to wait and present it to myself, and then I can provide that information to you once I get back to my laptop.
That sounds fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll be happy to.
I'm Cindy Sellers, Haywood County citizen. Been working with New Hope Samaritans since this, a group that's been created. And we have seen, I guess my eyes have been open to the poverty level here. I've been very sheltered. I've seen things that I don't know how in the world these people live the way they do. And a lot of this is coming out now because of the cold weather. Some people, I want to know about these people that are living, this was their place of home, a camper. You know, there's got to be other things for these extremely low income people. They can't afford. I mean, I've been looking for rental property for people. And a few things I find, but most of the things, as one guy put it, he said, gosh, the floors in this trailer are so wampity, you know, and knowing that that's not going to last. So, and another thing is these homes that are in flood areas now, I mean, I think it was saying that HUD wanted to replace what's there, you know, fixing homes, but will there be consideration for a home that was lost? Maybe it's repairable, but now it's in a flood zone. What do they do? Where do they go forward? Do they repair and take another chance for another flood? You know, that's part of it. But what I see too here in our community is our people need advocates. We need people in these programs to go out and knock on doors and talk to these people. A lot of them are scared. I have a lady that will not leave a mold-infested camper because it was her home, and she's afraid she won't get back. So, I mean, and a lot of them, they don't even know what's out there. They're not on the internet. When it says go out here and fill this out and file this and follow your claim, they're not on the internet. They don't know how to do that. So advocates within the program who know the area, who know where to go to these people, is a great need here.
Thank you for that comment. I really appreciate the feedback on making sure we address the people and meet them where they need help. That's really helpful, and I think that's a good kind of feedback for this program as we consider how we set it up and how we get people enrolled. I'm not sure I got all of the questions, but let me see how I can address some of them, and then I'll get you to ask me again to make sure I get everything you wanted me to address. On the part about if you're in a floodplain, so there are going to be multiple options for people there. There is a buyout program, It's not run right now out of my office. It's run with another part of the state government. But people can choose, and some people are already choosing to do this, that they don't want to come back. They're afraid to come back. They don't want to live in a floodplain anymore. So they are going to be bought out. And what that means is they go through a buyout and they move somewhere else, and the land just goes back to being uninhabited. I know that's not a good solution for everybody. And so in that case, the mitigation part of the funds that we have, which that's that $186 million, which we divided up into all these categories, that helps us address things like raising a home, raising a private road or bridge. So it's safe to be in that area. It's hard for me to say how many of those we can do because it's kind of a case-by-case basis, but that's an option for how we use that mitigation money so we make the home safe to be in. I think you had a first part at the beginning, and I'm not sure if I addressed that part, so please ask me again if I did not.
Stephanie, you answered all her questions.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the comments.
Dale Glantz, I won't talk about highways, roads. And first I want to thank the commissioners of Haywood County and other county officials and the town of Clyde's mayor and wonderful ladies that work there, because our state officials ain't worth a dime. We have 389 homes in Thompson Cove, Chambers Mountain, Thickety area in Clyde. Every time the pigeon comes out, we can't get in or out. It's been that way when I was still working, had to park on the interstate. But all we're told by our state officials, live with it. Now our homes may not be the greatest in the world, but we pay taxes. There's a highway that runs right along beside Interstate 40 from Thickety. It's finished for a mile, like less than a mile. It's been that way since 1970. Could be finished with no houses. But if it wasn't for these county commissioners helping us folks in the town of Clyde, we'd just be up the creek without a paddle, which we are. We're stuck. EMS can't get to us. And I hope I'm getting on some deaf ears, because 55 years is long enough for a road not to be finished. We can come out on interstate and never bother the interstate at exit 31. 389 families ought to be worth something. I'm appreciated for the work. If it wasn't for these commissioners, we wouldn't be crap in Clyde. I don't care who likes or who don't be saying it. That's what I feel. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, sir. And just for clarification, is that a state-owned road that goes to your? It is. Okay. Thank you.
Cannot get no response except from the secretary, and the congressman says live with it. Had a meeting 3 days before the last one. That's real representative, I don't think.
I'm sorry that y'all are having to deal with that.
I'm not. There's 389 families. How many kids and stuff, but it's ridiculous. And I've paid taxes for 70-something years now.
Gotcha. I'll look into it for you, and yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Jared Araji from Haywood Habitat for Humanity and resident of Canton, North Carolina. To what extent are the allocations listed in the PowerPoint kind of a done deal? Because I hear numbers like 53 million for workforce housing, and that represents to me like 125 homes for families in this region. I think it's $300,000 to $400,000 for a workforce house right now, and 50 million just doesn't seem like enough to really make a dent across several counties. To what extent is the infrastructure money that we're looking at, is that kind of is that written in stone, or can those numbers be increased so that we can extend infrastructure away from the floodplain, so that we can open up some land that is in the county to city water and sewage, and increase the tax base around the county? I think there's a lot of land that we would love to use for habitat, but it costs us too much money thinking about well and septic to really build out in the county. So we really rely on city infrastructure to build affordable housing. So to what extent can we look for an increase in allocations to workforce housing and infrastructure?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. This is not set in stone. Part of the purpose of today and the rest of the 30-day period is for you to say, look, you don't have enough money in workforce housing, or you don't have enough money in infrastructure. I will tell you that we don't have enough money, period. So the question and the hard challenge that we have here with scarce resources is, how do we allocate this? You know, if we put more money in workforce, do we take it away from rehabilitating and reconstructing homes that were destroyed during the hurricane for the poorest of the poor? We don't have enough money, and it's a hard decision to make of how to allocate the funds that we do have. So I would, we welcome your feedback on where you think the money should go. This is not set in stone. This is what we are putting out there for y'all to give us feedback and comments on.
My only response is that as a member of the community, I implore you to use these funds to extend infrastructure, to open up more land outside of the floodplain for the people of Western North Carolina.
I appreciate that. I will tell you that I think part of the goal that we have for these meetings is for you to tell us stuff like that, because this may not be the best use of funds for things like that, but we do have access to other funds for roads, for things like that. So even if it doesn't come out of this pot of money, by you articulating the need and giving us as much detail as you can, that allows us to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, should we take it out of the CDBG DR fund? Should we try to get it from a different source of federal funds, a different source of state funds? But it really helps us for you to tell us what it is that you need. And even the gentleman before you about the road issue that they're having with that impacts 389 families. We need to know about that so that we can know and go back and let people know about, and look at the whole picture and figure out the best way to try to address some of these challenges.
Green light. There we go. Daniel Manring, Director of Tuckasegee Water and Sewer Authority in Jackson County. This is kind of a follow-up question with regards to infrastructure and expanding water and sewer to workforce housing or any of the other delineated housing. I don't have much familiarity with CDBG funding, but when you're doing a project like the last gentleman spoke to with workforce housing, do you get to tap in for that project to another pot of money like the infrastructure pot and combine funding versus that infrastructure being included in the pot of the workforce housing? I'm really asking for clarity in the room that you can tap different funds for a project.
You mean different parts of CDBG, DR, or even different pots of other federal funding?
Yes to all of that.
Okay. So you can do it. Here's the thing about CDBG, DR. HUD is very strict about duplication of benefits. So it makes it a pretty bureaucratic and difficult program in which to handle, and people who have more CDBG experience than I do will tell you even more war stories of it. So you can access other funds, and that would be the intention, so that we're stretching this as far as we can. But we have to be very careful that we do not duplicate benefits. HUD is very strict about that. This is supposed to be the funding of last resort, as in you could not find any other funding for the same project. And that's true for individual homeowners, it's true for local governments, it's true for nonprofits. So there's a heavy administrative burden. And I just want to caveat the answer of yes, you can, with knowing that there will be an administrative burden that we have to go through to make sure there's no duplication of benefits.
Hi, I'm Maggie, Maggie Leftwich with Mountain Projects. Going off of the infrastructure question, I think one of the questions that the previous person was asking, so you have these divisions as far as like infrastructure and housing. So are we saying that those two different pots of money can be used on the same project? It just would be an administrative burden, or would they have to be separate projects?
I haven't really contemplated this question in great detail. I think you could probably use them for the same, but it's going to get complicated. We would have to be very, very clear that, like, say you were going to use some to run infrastructure to workforce housing, and then you were going to also build the workforce housing, and you got both of that from CDBG DR.
Right.
We would have to figure out, and I think, so this is just a proposal of how we use the money, just to be clear, and you can see it in the action plan when you have a chance to look at it. It's online. We don't have the details of how this would worked out yet. That comes after we get through HUD's process, and then we figure out the details. So part of what is helpful to me is to hear that that is something that y'all may want to do. We just have to be very clear. And to give you an example, not in this situation, but say for an individual homeowner, like part of the duplication of benefits, as an example that HUD provides, is if a homeowner had damage to their house and they got a check from FEMA and they got insurance money and they got a grant from a private entity and they got a loan from SBA, we would have to take the amount of the house and then subtract out each of those amounts and only be able to spend what was left. And that's what they mean by duplication of benefits. The federal government does not want us to spend money twice or to double dip. And so what y'all are suggesting is probably doable, but we're going to have to make sure that the money that's spent on running the water and sewer to a workforce house is documented and clear and separate from the part where you actually build the house.
Okay, thank you. I have one more comment on this, and then I've got a question. So with the infrastructure, if we're able to develop that outside of these floodplains, that could benefit not only, just workforce housing, but also, maybe relocation out of the flood zone for folks. We are trying to get people housed in my organization, And we have people that are coming to us that lost their homes back in 2021 and then rebuilt and lost their homes again this past fall. So it not only is a financial burden, but it really does cause a lot of personal trauma for these folks. And, you know, a lot of them are afraid to even go back to those places. So if we can create safer spots for them to be housed, that would help in so many different ways. My next question, final question is, so I know that it takes a long time for funding to get down to the level where it's utilized. And as we've seen, the economy is very unstable. It fluctuates a lot, and we've seen a lot of rising costs as far as building supplies, materials, as well as contracting services. So how can we, is there a way to kind of ensure that these estimates are going to be able to project, I guess, get, have the effect that we're intending with as far as the plan goes?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question about the estimates and the plan. Can you ask me that again?
Well, the cost of building now, if we, you know, if we were to plan now, and then by the time that the money gets down to being used, the pricing has gone up by a third, say, which is not unrealistic considering the way things have gone in the past few years.
Right.
Are there any safeguards or anything like that that we can anticipate?
No, unfortunately, no. We're at the mercy of the federal government. So the longer it takes, we have to live with the pricing that exists when we are ready to start building. And we're doing everything that we can on our side to always be ready, so that if somebody's waiting, they're not waiting on the state. We're waiting on HUD. But you raise a really important point, and it's been really hard in other disasters as well. We have no way to lock in prices now. And as for your comment about the folks who were flooded out twice, I mean, that's where I think either mitigation or buyout, and I think having a longer discussion would be necessary. My heart goes out to them. My brother lives in Mississippi, and he got flooded out in Katrina, and it is devastating for families, and having to go through that twice is very difficult. And I appreciate your advice and your feedback as we figure out the best way to work with these folks that have experienced these losses.
Good morning. My name is Zelda Briarwood. I work with Quality Data Systems, and I am also here today as a citizen of Canton, North Carolina. I have a bunch of stuff that I would like to propose, but I'm going to bring it down to just two things right now. Recently, I got a mailer from the city of Canton letting me know that I potentially have lead pipes bringing water to my house. And I don't know specifically how many other people just in the Canton area have that as an issue, but considering, you know, lead is known to cause major issues when it comes, like neurologically and beyond, I was wondering, do we have the possibility of putting some of this money towards redoing some of the piping and infrastructure that we have, so that way the water that is coming to people's houses is not potentially bringing in other health concerns? And along those lines, could we potentially use some of this money for bringing high-speed internet to these areas? Because, I'm sorry, what was your name? As Cindy said, not everyone in these counties and these areas have access to internet, and that is a lifeline in today's day and age.
Thank you for your questions. They're very good and thoughtful. On the internet broadband one, I'll address that one first. There is already money that has been appropriated, over $1 billion, from the state fiscal recovery funds, which were federal pandemic funds that came down through the American Rescue Plan Act. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, or ARPA. And that lives over at the North Carolina Department of Information Technology. They are in the process of deploying those funds, working with the counties and providers for internet. So I think that would be something that would be covered there. We have through the end of December 31st, 2026 to spend that money. So I anticipate if you have not already seen an improvement, and it could just be that where you are talking about, they haven't quite gotten the broadband there yet. But the plan is to have 97 to 99% of high-speed internet for everyone in North Carolina. The 1 to 3% of the population that's harder to reach are remote barrier islands, and candidly, some of the folks that are really hard to reach in the far, far parts or coves of the mountains. So we can give you information if you will send us your information or give it to Holly or Drew. We can put you in touch with DIT so you know exactly, and you can ask specific questions about specific areas there. On the lead pipe issue, certainly this money, especially for rehabilitation and reconstruction, even though HUD money is cumbersome, part of what's good about HUD money is when you rebuild to current standards. So if you have a house that has problems, leaky roof, mold, you remediate that when you either reconstruct or rehab the house. If it's external to the home, that's where we need your feedback on things that need to happen. And we would look at, from an infrastructure perspective, to see if this would be the best use of funds or there would be another use of funds. But I think definitely letting us know so that we can look at that and work with local governments to see what other resources are available would be really helpful. The Department of Environmental Quality is the department in Raleigh that works with local governments on their water and sewer, and so they have additional funds as well. So it's important, again, sometimes we're going to highlight issues, and maybe it's the best use of funding for CDBG DR, and maybe there's a better source of funding, but it's really important, I think, for y'all to highlight the issues, and I thank you for doing that so that we can know what you're facing.
Thank you. And one more question, if I may. Recently, it was reported by the Asheville Watchdog, which is a local news outlet, that Buncombe County and Asheville have been threatened by the Trump administration that they will not receive any federal funding if they do not comply with the mass deportation that is happening. Should we be operating on the same assumption for the remainder of the counties in the area?
I'm not aware of that specific situation. I do read the Asheville Watchdog from time to time. I would say that the state has not received anything like that, and we are operating. The award that was made, there have been 2 CDBG DR awards that have been made, one to the state of North Carolina, one to the city of Asheville. So we have not received any correspondence to that effect.
Are there any more questions? One more question so far.
Cindy Sellers, Haywood County. I know in this we keep talking long-term, long-term, long-term. Is there not anything short-term? That these people, we've got people that supposedly are, you got to get out, you're going to lose your hotel voucher and all this, but with this money, because I was there with Fred too, and how long that's taken. But is this not anything that we can look to for short-term housing? And if not, do you know an agency that can help us look in here? Because I have some people I've been keeping in contact with, and just like with FEMA, a trailer park that has taken forever, unless it's happened in the last week or so, to get approved. It's like what do I do with people that are freezing out here? I mean, this is happening. It is real. And it's not a made up story. And I mean, I don't know where else to tell them to go. You know, I can give you a heater. I'll give you some more blankets. I mean, what do you do? But is there anything here now with this program that we can do a quick help these people, rapid response type thing?
Cindy, thank you for your question. The short answer is we need to get the information, and Holly and Drew can help you with that so that we can figure out what other resources we have available to help with the short-term response. It is incredibly frustrating to me. It's incredibly frustrating to others that this federal money is not meant for short-term. It's not meant for rapid response, and it doesn't work that way. We do not have the money in hand. It is in Washington, D.C., and we do not have a way to get the money for several more months if we're lucky. So we've got to rely on the other federal resources that we have available through FEMA and our own creativity and any state resources we can pull together. And the resources do exist, but sometimes it causes us to have to be really creative and responsive and think on the ground. So I would encourage you, Drew will get your information, Holly will get your information, and we'll get you in touch with the right people who are working on the rapid response, because that's what we need to do for those folks. And we hear your frustration. We also feel it. We are very much at the mercy of how the federal programs work.
And to add on to that, the state legislatures allocated almost $1 billion. None of that has been, sent out to, to actual people on the ground so far, or local governments. But Governor Stein was in D.C. yesterday and announced that he's asking the federal government for an additional $19 billion, I believe, from federal government, and that should help. Hopefully, if that's what Congress allocates, that would be a more rapid response than this, because I believe that this HUD plan all this money has to be spent after a total of 6 years. So this is a more long-term approach versus the state legislature and Congress can allocate money that would help for more short-term.
Hi, my name is Leslie Pringle, and I represent Haven on the Hill, which is a refuge site for Helene survivors. We have roughly 115 people on site and about 75 donated RVs. We function solely on donations. I have asked FEMA several times in the past for help. It took begging for 4 months to get someone on site to at least get the applications from our people. I have asked for of the basically 1,000 FEMA trailers that we were promised in North Carolina. I've asked for 100 of those. I've seen absolutely zero response to that. Can you provide us any help?
Yes, ma'am. We'll talk offline here after the meeting, and I'll get your information and see what we can track down from FEMA to help out. Any other questions? One additional question.
Maybe more of a comment than a question. And Bryant Moorhead, County Manager, Haywood County. We've got our finance staff here, and through Fred, we learned about all of the red tape with CDBG, DR. The permitting, the archaeological review, fish and wildlife, all of that needs to be streamlined. We know it takes a long time, but when the money gets here, we really need process improvement if we're going to move the freight. And the county folks are the ones that are the front line. We're tasked every day to lock up the bad guys and vaccinate kids, educate kids, all of that stuff. And we just need money and flexibility to serve our community. Right now, I know you don't have the money and the feds don't, but we're in a fight here. And not just the county, Lisa and Joy back there, Rob, we're all in the ditch together, and we really need flexibility and money so we can start working for our community. And it's frustrating and it moves slow, but we know our community. We work in it every day. We serve the folks And we want the opportunity to do that, and it just needs to move quicker. Thanks.
I hear you. I appreciate your frustration. We're going to do everything we can on the state side to make it move faster. I think we've learned some valuable lessons from the past and things that we didn't do the right way that we're going to change this time. I don't know how to make the federal government move any faster, but I welcome your partnership on that as we try to figure that part of it out. And we always welcome your feedback and your comments and give you our email addresses or phone numbers, and you can call us and tell us, because we know that the partnership we have with the counties is very valuable, and we do very much appreciate it.
I think after we're done with questions, the meeting will be done, and obviously we can have some ancillary one-on-one conversations with me, and then obviously since Stephanie's unfortunately stuck in Raleigh, I'll pass those questions on to her so we can try and get you an official answer. And
It's just a registration form to say you are here. But if you have a comment.
I'm going to come down front if you don't mind. My name's Chuck Dixon. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem of the town of Waynesville, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's not from Waynesville here and the rest of the county folks and other counties who are here today. The mayor couldn't be here. He's out of town, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. What I would like to speak about mainly is the community infrastructure program. The way it is proposed to be set up and administered will not help us with many of our current unmet needs in the town of Waynesville. And let me explain. And I think the other towns in the county have the same situation. The town of Waynesville experienced significant damage to our standalone finance department. That's the old Hazelwood Town Hall, our sewer plant, a major bridge in town, ballparks, park facilities, trails, and stream bank buffers. The projects to repair this damage will hopefully receive major reimbursement from FEMA, but FEMA will only pay to build back what was there at the time of the flood. It will not pay for any upgrades to flood-proof the infrastructure or to make them more resilient in future floods. And we can't wait to repair and rebuild. Our small staff has spent countless hours complying with conflicting FEMA requirements, doing our best, and still praying that we're going to be reimbursed by FEMA. We have advanced hundreds of thousands of dollars from our fund balance. These funds are no longer earning interest, putting another dent in our budget. None of the projects we need money for can wait for CDBG funding. And even so, under the proposed plan, none would qualify as they do not meet the $500,000 threshold. A grant that covered multiple projects could perhaps benefit us, but again, it will be too late as we have to repair now. We have to open the bridge now. Our employees have to go back to work in the finance department, and our children and adults need the recreational facilities and ballparks ASAP. Please reconsider the $500,000 threshold. That's a requirement for grants under the infrastructure program. And as to another matter, in general, a competitive grant process does not favor the small town members of our Southwest COG. The town of Waynesville is the largest town in the region. We have a little over 10,000 people. We hired a grant writer administrator about a year ago who is now swamped with FEMA paperwork and other onerous, time-consuming CDBG grants. Most of the other towns are not so lucky. They don't have full-time grant coordinators, but even the small staff of the town of Waynesville cannot compete with large towns and counties outside our region with the expertise, experience, and person power of grant writing staffs. And it is impractical, on another matter, to ask us to spend thousands of dollars, which we don't have, and countless hours to prepare applications for shovel-ready projects with itemized mitigation costs with no guarantee of funding after going through the somewhat subjective and political award process. Perhaps, and this is a suggestion, you could solicit simple preliminary funding applications with initial approvals and final applications when funding is more assured. Or to put it another way, you could entertain applications with a scope of work, set aside a lump sum, and then allow the applicant to design and submit a plan based on the allocated funds. Don't make us spend valuable time and money just to be denied later. And I do want to also briefly address the commercial district revitalization. We lost many buildings in our Frog Level area of town, the historic section around down the street here, the former train depot, and we will be interested in applying for these funds. But again, we have the same concerns. To prepare a grant application under the proposed plan requires money and expertise that our town does not have. So we're going to have to expend time and money with no guarantee of funding. Again, an application with a simple scope of work, a set aside of money, and a Department of Commerce that works with us to design a plan is what we need. We don't mind rigorous evaluation. We're used to that, and we welcome it. But we need you to work with us rather than to judge us. We appreciate the governor setting up the Division of Community Revitalization, and we appreciate your efforts. And thank you, Stephanie, for being on the call today. I'm also the son of a Methodist minister who grew up at Lake Junaluska and attended the Haywood County schools. But we are very concerned about the lengthy, years-long process, a burdensome application process with no assurances of funding. And even if there is an award, there will be burdensome, time-consuming bureaucratic requirements. Please revise the plan to deal with the realities of small-town government in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful and valuable feedback and just what we were looking for. So I appreciate you kind of detailing out, and I hope maybe, I know you saw you reading from your notes, so maybe you can give your notes to Ann or someone in the room so we can get them, make sure we have it fully documented what you think. I can't make HUD move faster, but we can certainly take in your feedback and commentary on how to do the process so it's not so difficult. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's very helpful.
Thank you. And I did want to encourage everyone to read your plan. It's on the Department of Commerce website. It was just posted 2 or 3 days ago. So many of the folks who have questions here could get some of the answers from that proposed plan, although it is just proposed and hopefully will be changed.
Yeah, so thank you. That's very, very helpful advice. Again, I can do a lot of what you asked for. I can't make that move faster, but I appreciate, so I don't know how to get the money to you faster because we don't have it, but I do appreciate the rest of the comments and how to make it better.
I am really honored to be here today and seeing each and every one of us that have lived through not one but possibly 2 hurricanes. I've been in North Carolina on and off my whole life, and it's been really something to not see something on TV, but actually experience it, because you can never feel what people feel on the ground, the people that you're discussing and living in such terrible conditions, and of course not having a road down my street to a house that's been there 50 years. I see it every day. A pet peeve of mine is all the old junk cars that are sitting around. If I could donate a few dollars, it'd be to tow them to the junkyard and have them scrap once and for all. But I'm going to jump fast forward because I only heard about this about a week ago, and I put on my thinking cap, and it's like, well, how could I help Haywood County, Buncombe County, and all the counties that we so love and enjoy, and especially in the fall when all the foliage goes crazy. And this last year, we didn't have that opportunity. So what I have here, if I have it correct, is a current picture of all the rail lines that are currently structured and functioning, as long as they're all repaired after the hurricane, that exist. Each and every one of the small towns, including the one we're standing in, we could possibly heard the train going by this morning, the train whistle. Well, that track is only a couple hundred yards from here or less. And the last time we had passenger rail service in this part of North Carolina was 1948. Now, one of the aspects of trains, by the way, how many people had a Lionel train as a kid? How many people had the train going around the Christmas tree? I mean, it was just a cool thing to watch that thing go around. Maybe it'd make noise or chug along. Well, the big thing that everybody is saying about right now is the cost, the cost, the cost. I understand that. Well, guess what? All the tracks are there. It's not an engineering issue. It is a political issue and some funding. Now, this next picture is the latest state-of-the-art self-propelled rail car. This particular one is currently operating in a little place you might have heard called Dallas, Texas, between the airport and downtown. Gets up to about 90 miles an hour if they put their foot into it. They also have electric versions, they have diesel versions, and they even have newer ones that are hydrogen version. So they really get around, and what do they eliminate? The huge cost of operating a locomotive, which is most of the weight and most of the operating cost of any railroad. This basically needs a driver and someone to take tickets. And they can even go to automated processes. So what I am proposing, and I'm hopefully going to find the right paperwork and things to submit, would be to create a board and look at some way to create a lower cost, easy access rail service as far south as possibly Dillsboro, Bryson City, connect with other train. And by the way, one of the great things we do have here that has not been washed away is people want to come and see us. I'm sorry. Watching the outpouring of individuals and businesses and churches that showed up in our neighborhoods. You know, I've heard of how bad FEMA can be, and I've now experienced it firsthand. And when people are showing up with lunch trucks, making sandwiches, and are still in some parts of the areas, it gives me great hope. And so that these communities that have been so ravaged, again, this is future. This is future infrastructure. That something could provide a ride from Silva to the airport without ever having to get on the freeway. Anybody ever get stuck on the freeway here? You've got 2 lanes going, 2 lanes coming, but when it gets stuck, it's stuck. I would also like to take it one step further, and then I'll pretty much wrap it up. Biltmore sees 1.5 million people a year. The Great Smoky Railroad down in Bryson City, they have 250,000 people come to ride that rail. It's a going business. I can only imagine how many people that would love to come to one of the only places in the country they could ride a much smaller, more intimate vehicle. They even have designs for bringing your bicycles along or luggage or whatever else. In fact, the Japanese have gone one step further. They now have rail buses, which means the bus can drive onto the rail, go where the rails go, and then it can get off the rail and drive to the local airport, civic center, drive around, drop the people off, get back on the rail, and head on down the tracks. So again, the technology exists. But again, I wanted to plant that seed as a possibility of bringing another form of transportation, mass transportation, that serves us as a community. Not just the same old, same old. Thank you so much for your time. And again, my name is Justin Elledge. I'm just a private citizen with a crazy idea. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Justin. It's definitely important to think about, the future going forward and, life after the storm. I think we have a question over here. Ma'am, do you have your question? Yeah.
Becky Johnson with the Mountaineer. I was wondering if you could touch on the economy commercial district revitalization. Is that something that businesses would apply for, or is that something that local governments would apply for? And is that enough to cover the extent of damage that we've seen to commercial areas throughout the Helene damage area?
The proposal as presented, thank you for that question. I regularly read the Mountaineer, so I'm excited to have a question from you. The proposal as presented is to have local governments or nonprofits apply for the commercial district revitalization. I can't say if it's enough. I think generally we're working with not enough money. So we were trying to figure out how to allocate it in a way, again, knowing that we have no other funds for housing, that we focus mostly on housing, but we certainly would welcome comments and feedback on how much money people think we should put into it and where we should take it from.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that question. Karina, Haywood County Tourism, I'll speak to that point. We do not have enough money for economy, but I don't know where you take it from because you also don't have enough for everything else. But I'll point to, for long-term stability of Haywood County and all of Western North Carolina, our economy is the number one way to do it. It keeps our businesses up and running. They pay their taxes. We get sales tax for the county, occupancy tax that we can invest back in our communities, and it keeps our people employed. So however that money gets divvied up, I would encourage you to keep the economy piece of that pie as large as possible, knowing that this is for long-term recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Hi, I'm Patricia Cantrell. I work in the Finance Department of Haywood County. I'm the Grants Administrator. Stephanie, we understand that you can't move the federal government in ways that you probably would want to in order to release these funds. But I would like to reiterate and say an amen to the Mayor Pro Tem from Waynesville and our County Manager, who talked about the burden of the administration that goes with these funds. There's typically no admin money sliced out for these projects, and local governments and nonprofit organizations end up expending countless human resources and time resources administering these funds. And so anything that you can do, Holly, from the governor's office all the way on down, to make that message clear to HUD. We are currently administering HUD dollars for some housing that's from Tropical Storm Fred. We haven't even begun to deal with Helene yet. So we're still trying to get funding released from Tropical Storm Fred for debris cleanup and other kinds of things. And those projects are moving, but it is a grind to get that done. So again, I second that, those emotions about the administrative burden, and anything that you can do to maybe help us slice out some admin dollars or provide some technical assistance to smooth the way with HUD would relieve some of that local burden as well, and maybe speed up the flow of some of these funds, because we are all frustrated with not being able to provide the help as quickly as all of us want to. And we really thank you for being here today. And Stephanie, I say hi from Dan Gerlach, if that counts for anything.
It does. Thank you. And thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's really helpful for us to hear it. And I like the suggestions that have been made, and I'm thinking through how we can make that work. I also wonder if there's a way to do a partnership. We were pretty successful with the pandemic, so I'd love your feedback on this. With the pandemic partnership with the Association of County Commissioners, the League of Municipalities, the Councils of Government, and the School of Government, in terms of providing technical assistance that way. I don't know if there's something that you took advantage of with that, or if you had thoughts on that, but I would welcome those as well, as we kind of think about the how do we do that part of it, and how do we make it easier? Because you're right, we all have to deal with HUD, so how can we make it easier on the state side and the county side?
We've got time for more questions, but we also want to be respectful of everybody's time here. So I know we have one more question here, but does anybody have any questions after that? If not, hold your peace. All right, we'll give you the last question.
What an honor. Zelda Briarwood again. Real quick, has anyone been to Domino Park in Brooklyn? Okay, just a little bit of information. It's located in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, sits at the site of the old Domino Sugar Refinery, a building that was incredibly important to the growth and the borough's waterfront. It was designed by an artist, Mark Riegelman. They ended up building the Domino Park Playground, which pays tribute to not only its site, but what they manufactured there, as the structure takes kids on a de facto journey through the sugar production process. I don't know if y'all can pick up where I'm going with this. I think that it would be a fantastic idea for revitalization as well as for tourism and economy purposes if we take elements from the mill over in Canton and use that to create a industrial or historical playground that kids can come to that honors the work that the mill has done and the people that have done there, while also bringing in the opportunity for people as they come through Western North Carolina for things like tourism or coming on the railway and whatnot. It ends up making it a part of the destination without turning it into Asheville, if that makes sense. It would also be incredibly beneficial for us to be working with Spiritas Worldwide, because we have a bunch of equipment and elements that are already there that exist that we would just need to repurpose, which would save time and money. And I'm all about reusing resources as a means of, continuing what we have. So I have that proposal I would like to just throw on out there. And if anyone would like to help me out with that proposal in specifics, I would love to speak with you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I turn it back over to Stephanie for final words, myself, Drew Christie with Grow NC, and Holly Jones with the Governor's Office will be here for kind of one-on-one meetings and questions after the event. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Stephanie, for final words.
Thank you, Drew. I just want to thank everyone for their comments. Please keep them coming. We shared all the ways you can share those comments online and through even the regular mail service. We really appreciate them. They make our plan better because we are getting your perspectives and your feedback. I appreciate the comments about how hard this is. I think it's going to continue to be hard, and talking to disaster recovery experts about how hard it's been in other states and how slow it's been. It's just, I know that we're in for a hard time, and I appreciate your partnership and your willing to work with us as we continue. I think this recovery is going to take time. I very much appreciate Russ and Becca and all the staff at the Southwestern Council of Government for putting this together and then for making it work when I got stuck here in Pittsburgh. So I hope I'll be able to be out there another time when I'm not snowed in and get to meet some of you in person. I do travel to Haywood County frequently, so I appreciate again all of your comments and help let us know where we need to follow up. Drew and Holly will be there to help. Thank you.
And with that, we're adjourned.